Yo, the NFL trade deadline has come and gone. Can you believe it? We already in week 9 of the NFL season. And it's shaping up to be a very interesting one as we get into the later half of the season. But we got to talk about this trade deadline, man, and all the different moves and transactions that happen across the NFL over the past 2 weeks, because it's been very active. There's been a lot of activity going on. So we're going to talk about who actually won the trade deadline and who lost the trade deadline, and just go from there. Now, the Carolina Panthers are obviously shaping their roster up to basically clean house. I know that they got Steve Wilks. I know that they're still in contention for the NFC South crown. But let's be honest here. PJ Walker, Dante Foreman, a couple of guys like in DJ Moore at the wide receiver position. They pretty much kept their defense, but let's be honest here. I don't really see them coming out on top in the NFC South. I really see them just stacking up their picks and things for a deeper haul into next season so that they can, reshape their franchise. But as far as the 49ers, I mean, come on, they get a stud in Christian McCaffrey, who has already shown his stripes there. He's already made waves. He's hit the triple crown, and they're going into the bye week looking very promising as we go into the later half and get ready for these playoffs. So I think that they've definitely solidified themselves. We'll get back to them later. Next, we have the Roquan Smith trade, traded from the Bears to the Baltimore Ravens. And I actually love this trade, man. I think that the Baltimore Ravens could definitely benefit from a guy who's leading the league in tackles, if I'm not mistaken. And the Chicago Bears, I mean, they're another one. Their team is pretty much in contention for, a very early draft pick next season. And so, they're just kind of retooling their defense. They've got rid of Robert Quinn, now Roquan Smith. So they're obviously, I wouldn't say throwing in the white towel, but I mean, let's be honest here. Did you really expect them to do anything other than what they're doing now? I don't think so. So we got that trade there. Very good trade for the Baltimore Ravens. And then we had the Bradley Chubb deal going from the Denver Broncos to the Miami Dolphins. Now, this is very interesting because the Dolphins are doing pretty good. So them getting Bradley Chubb just tells you how much they see potential in going deep this season and possibly even going for a deep playoff run. They want a guy who can just, kind of shore up things on that defense, because I know that they got some studs over there, but they need somebody who can kind of pressure the quarterback, somebody who can put, pressure on the QB and also make good tackles in the open field. And Bradley Chubb is your guy. Now, I think the Denver Broncos actually won that trade. And then they picked up a guy in Chase Edmonds, who I know a lot of people write him off, but I've been following this guy since he was playing with the Arizona Cardinals. And let's keep in mind, man, I mean, last year he was doing a tremendous job just with his role. He's an excellent role player. They also got first-round pick for next year's draft and then a fourth-round pick in the 2024 draft. So that first-round pick, I mean, anytime you get that, if you do right in the draft department, you can pick up a stud. So that was very good. But Chase Edmonds, I see him definitely being a complimentary back for Russell Wilson to throw out of the backfield and just to kind of take the pressure off of Russell Wilson, because right now the Denver Broncos running back stable is very subpar. I know people are raving about Latavius Murray and Melvin Gordon, who I dislike like hell. I don't like him at all. But Chase Edmonds is definitely going to, make some waves in that backfield. We had another trade with the Bears, who were very active in this trade market. And they also completed a trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers, sending a second-round pick for Chase Claypool. And I think that was absolutely terrible. Horrendous. Chase Claypool probably would command a 5th or 6th at best in my eyes. I mean, the guy is kind of like, he's not the smartest apple in the bunch. And it's like, act like he's the most talented receiver that they could have gone for. I would have expected them to try to shoot for a guy like Brandon Cooks, but that's just my opinion. Chase Claypool is now playing with Justin Fields, so it does give him somebody who's more of a receiver. as opposed to your Darnell Mooney and your Equanimous Brown. Try to say that fast 3 times. But yeah, you got that. And then we also had a TJ Hockenson trade. So this trade was done in the division, which you rarely see those types of things happen. And it always raises red flags. Anytime a team trades a player within the division, that just makes me scream scam alert. And it's almost like you're buying a bad car. You're buying a lemon, right? Because TJ Hockenson has been up and down. He had that one breakout game this season that sent his fantasy projections through the roof. And since then, he's just been playing very average, very subpar. And I don't really see what the Vikings are expecting to get out of him. Maybe I'm not that really big of a follower of the Vikings, so I don't really know who their tight end is over there, and maybe that's the reason why they went after him, because I don't know who the tight end is, and maybe you all don't either. So they needed a tight end. The Detroit Lions were willing to jump at what they sent to him, and I'm hearing that the Detroit Lions got a 2023 second round pick and also a 2024 third round pick. So I mean, that's good compensation for a guy who has basically been up and down in your system. And again, they're 1-6, so they're trying to get as much draft capital and to prepare themselves for next season, which is a common theme in Detroit, regardless of the grit theme and all the promising things that they made people think during the Hard Knocks training camp. But the Minnesota Vikings also, they get a 2023 fourth round pick and then a conditional fourth round pick in 2024. So I don't know, man. Both of these teams really didn't get much. It's kind of just a moving of players, and that's what it is. We went over this other trade that I'm getting ready to talk about, and that's the Robert Quinn trade that occurred between the Eagles and the Bears. I talked about it up here, and after seeing him in that first game, I definitely see why the Bears may have gotten rid of Robert Quinn. I'm not saying that Robert Quinn is washed, but I am saying that age, Father Time, is catching up with him. And maybe he is slowing down. Maybe the Bears saw that and they really felt like they weren't losing anything in getting rid of him. You cut bait with that contract. You cut bait with an older player who probably isn't going to re-sign with you anyway. Let's be honest. They get a fourth round pick for that guy. And what I'm hearing, Robert Quinn has already agreed to part ways with the Eagles after this season. So it was kind of like a Von Miller-esque deal that he had with the Rams last season. I don't know. Maybe he's going to start fitting in this defense after a couple of games, which I do foresee. But that does remain to be seen. I feel like both of those trades are just average at this point. And then we got the Calvin Ridley trade. Now, this one was shocking to me because here's a guy who's still serving his suspension, and the Falcons look like they need all the weapons that they possibly can get. Now, maybe that's the reason why they traded him, to get draft compensation. But then again, when I looked at it, they didn't even really get any good compensation for him, which makes no sense. They get a 2023 conditional 5th round pick and a 2024 conditional 2nd round pick. Like, the 2nd round pick is cool, but come on, man. Calvin Ridley is a stud. I understand that he kind of had a mishap during the offseason that caused him to be suspended, but sending him to the Jacksonville Jaguars, obviously they won't be able to enjoy him or even utilize him or see what he's working with until next season. But I do foresee that giving Trevor Lawrence and everybody over there, the staff, the coaching staff, what's his name? Doug Penderson. I do foresee that giving him just a little bit more of a reputable receiver outside of Christian Kirk. So you pair him up with Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne, it does make that offense just a little bit more scary. But again, we're not going to see that until next year, so who knows what next year holds. It's a toss-up between who won that trade. I'll go with the Jacksonville Jaguars because, you get a guy who has proven that he can be dominant in this league, and that just makes your offense just a little bit more threatening to defensive coordinators next year. Then we have the Kadarius Toney trade, which I'm actually happy for. I'm happy for Kadarius Toney. He was a guy coming out of Florida that I watched in Florida outside of the injuries that he had. I thought that he was a very good player. I thought that he was going to be a player who could go on the NFL roster, be a breakout player, be a player that could possibly return punts, get in the slot position, even run some plays or formations out of the backfield. But that did not materialize with the New York Giants. He never really caught on. He never caught a touchdown. He would show flashes one game, and then you wouldn't see him for the next 3 to 4 games, which is just very odd and beyond me. He goes to the Kansas City Chiefs, who I say they absolutely need him, and maybe he can be the poor man's Tyreek Hill. I'm not saying he's going to be Tyreek Hill, so don't misquote me, but I'm saying maybe he can be a poor man's version of that. You work him in the slot. Patrick Mahomes is like one of the best to do it, so he will find a way to utilize Kadarius Toney. And not only does he have that going for him, but he also has Andy Reid and their offensive coordinator, Vinny, to scheme and figure out ways to get this guy on the field and keep him on the field this time. But the New York Giants, they lose this trade hands down. Why? It's just the principle of the matter. You had a guy in your locker room who could have helped Daniel Jones, who could have been another threat opposite of Saquon Barkley, and you dropped the ball. You didn't find out ways to utilize them, and that's no fault on the staff that they have now, because that was the old regime that brought Kadarius Toney with Dave Gettleman and all those guys who were there before. But you kind of just dropped the ball on that, and you really didn't get much for him. You got a 3rd round compensatory pick, and then you got a 6th rounder, both in 2023, next year's draft. So not much for that. I don't really expect them to get any good compensation for those draft picks outside of maybe the 3rd rounder. Kansas City wins that trade hands down. This is a guy who they can plug in their system and he can make plays. Then you had the Buffalo Bills, who have been in talks all week. I would probably say actually they've been swirling in the news here lately for the last 2 to 3 weeks. You know, I've heard that they've tried to get Christian McCaffrey. I've heard that they've inquired about Kareem Hunt. I've heard that they've inquired on Cam Akers somewhat. And obviously that didn't materialize. They weren't able to get those guys. And they got someone in Nyheim Hines who I felt like was undervalued and very underutilized in Indianapolis. Why? Because he's a guy who you can plug him in. He's a great pass catching back that you can send. You can even line him up in the slot, line him up outside, and he can make plays for you if given the chance to. But the Indianapolis Colts, with everything that they've got going on over there, they're benching Matt Ryan. Their offense is just sputtering. Your guy, Jonathan Williams, is not looking like he's supposed to. He's not looking like anything of the MVP form that he showed last year. And everything just looks like it's on a downtrend in Indianapolis. They look like they're shaping up for next year. And they get Zach Moss, who, I mean, let's be honest, I don't really know too much about him. He never really did much in Buffalo besides, you know, maybe had a couple of break-off runs or a couple of pass. Hell, I don't even know if he did that because it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough volume. So I feel like they lose this trade hands down. Buffalo Bills, that's a dangerous trade. Keep in mind, Nyheim Hines might be flying under a lot of you all's radar, but don't get it twisted. This is a player who can be very sneaky and really help a guy like Josh Allen and take some of the pressure and some of the attention off of guys like Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. I'm just saying. I think that they might have done something with this trade, and I absolutely love it. He's not a star player. He's not some guy who you're probably going to go out and buy his jersey. But what I'm saying is you might want to put in stock for the Buffalo Bills to make a deep playoff run and even possibly a Super Bowl appearance. Not just because of Nyheim Hines, but just because they have now structured their team, and so the defense is strong and the offense just got a little bit stronger with Nyheim Hines in that backfield. Now let's talk about the Jeff Wilson trade. We all knew it was coming. I mean, the writing was on the wall. The moment that Christian McCaffrey's name was matched up with San Francisco, everyone knew Jeff Wilson was soon to be gone. And rightfully so. I mean, Jeff Wilson, he was a serviceable back in his time at San Francisco. I know that once Elijah Mitchell went down, he stepped up and he played fairly well. He had a couple of good weeks, but nothing to write home about, nothing to get too excited on. And I think that's the reason why they felt like they had to basically pull the trigger. They had to pull the trigger on snatching Christian McCaffrey when they could, because you just don't want to basically waste a season with a subpar backfield when you have the team that is strong enough to go deep in the playoffs. So they got that guy in Christian McCaffrey. They sent Jeff Wilson to the Miami Dolphins, and San Francisco picked up a 5th-round pick. So nothing too big about that. I feel like that's another trade that's just kind of like blah. You know what I'm saying? It's not that big of a deal. Jeff Wilson, I don't really see him doing much with the Miami Dolphins. I mean, I will say this, he probably will fit their system a little better than Chase Edmonds did, because Raheem Mostert, he's pretty much like the bell cow, if you can even call him that, for the Miami Dolphins right now. And Jeff Wilson is just going to be a good complimentary back to just serve his role. When Raheem Mostert gets tired, Jeff Wilson goes in. And it's just going to be as simple as that. He might get a couple first downs. He might score a touchdown, but it's nothing that big of a deal. And a 5th-round pick, come on now. Who cares? Then let's talk about the James Robinson trade. Now, James Robinson started off the season on a high note, and then as the season trickled into these later weeks, you just saw his production dwindle until it just faded away, and Travis Etienne just burst on the scene as if you never heard from him, seen him ever, and now he's just playing better than ever. If you picked him up in fantasy, smart guy or lady, because he's balling for you right now. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, they got a 6th-round pick. I mean, what more could you expect? James Robinson is not a game breaker. A lot of his production does depend on him being able to break a long run. And now that he's playing in a New York Jets offense that, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't really know what to say about the Jets offense, because there is none. With Zach Wilson playing at the quarterback position, he throws to everybody but New York Jets receivers. You got a guy like Elijah Moore who's not getting catches. People claim that he's not getting open, but I beg to differ. I watched the tape. He's getting open. Zach Wilson just not putting it there. And so I just don't see much coming from James Robinson. I mean, he can be a complimentary back to Michael Carter. I know they lost Breece Hall for the season. So who knows what James Robinson will be, and is this guy going to be somebody that you're going to keep or hold on to later after this season? I doubt it, because why would you? You got Breece Hall. Michael Carter has already, ingrained himself in that system. So James Robinson seems like a 1-year rental at best, and it's not as if this is going to be some game-breaking rental at that. It's no, you know what I'm saying? It's like, remember the days when you rented something or you rented some movie and you felt like, I want to keep it. It was just that good. I don't see that happening in the case of James Robinson. So I feel like this trade was a toss-up. I guess the New York Jets won it because, the Jaguars just got a conditional 6th-round pick. So you get a guy who, he is serviceable. So the Jets did win that trade. But let's move on to the Robbie Anderson trade. Again, they made this trade with the Carolina Panthers, who are, I'll say it again, just stacking up draft picks, getting themselves prepared for this long haul of changing their culture, changing their team. I can foresee that in the next 2 to 3 years, the Panthers team is going to look completely, drastically different than what we've been accustomed to the last 4 to 5 years. And I mean, everything's going to be different. The head coach, quarterback, running back, wide receivers, unless Donta Foreman just continues to show out like he has been. But Robbie Anderson, man, I don't know what to say about this guy. I thought that he was going to be a very promising player. I know he had that one good year. I think he was with the New York Jets at the time. But outside of that, man, he never really broke out in Carolina, and he has yet to show anything in Arizona. And I just don't. It's almost as if the guy just doesn't want to play football anymore. I mean, that's the type of body language that he displays, and it gets sickening because he's a guy who could really ball out if he chose to. He has the tangibles to do so. He has the speed, the length. But this guy just doesn't put it together, and I don't know if his heart is there or his focus, or maybe it's a combination of the two. But something is not right with Robbie Anderson. And to be honest with you, I feel like, yeah, even though the Carolina Panthers only got a 6th round pick and a 7th round pick for this guy in 2024 and 2025 respectfully, I feel like they won this trade more than the Arizona Cardinals, because Robbie Anderson is just somebody who will probably just drown in the wide receiver depth chart that the Arizona Cardinals have, because now you have DeAndre Hopkins back. Rondale Moore looks like somebody who can finally be put on display. You're going to have Marquise Brown come back at some point this season. Outside of that, I mean, why would you need a guy like Robbie Anderson? So will he even be there after this season? The world may never know. Then we had a kind of under the radar trade between the Cleveland Browns and the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta Falcons sent Deion Jones, the linebacker, and a 2024 7th round pick to the Browns, and they picked up a 2024 6th round pick. And I'm going to just say Deion Jones, I mean, look, he's cool. I like what he offers. He's a serviceable linebacker. It's not like he's one of those guys who you're putting in the tier of your Von Millers and your Khalil Macks, your Bradley Chubbs, those types of guys. He's not one of those upper tier guys. He's not some guy that you're going to write home about. And the Atlanta Falcons, I mean, he was somebody who was just counting. He had a lot of money on their cap, and it's not like they were going to re-sign him. So I feel like they won this trade because you get something out of them, and you didn't have to break the bank. It's not like you lost money. He served his role. He served his role while he was there. Now he's gone to Cleveland. Maybe he can do something with the Browns. Now let's talk about somebody who did, and that's the Washington Commanders and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, the Washington Commanders, it seems like they just find ways to take L's constantly. I don't know if you can consider this an L, but I would just say this. When they signed William Jackson III, who they sent to the Pittsburgh Steelers along with a 2025 conditional 7th round pick, signing William Jackson III, I knew immediately that this was not a match. Why? Because William Jackson III is a man-to-man corner, and Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio run a zone coverage scheme. And if you don't believe me, just check their formations. Those corners over there, they are usually 10 to 15, hell, sometimes 20 yards off the ball. So I don't understand why they even went after a guy. Why would they try to even plug this guy into their system and kind of force him into a player that they wanted him to be, instead of just letting him flourish with the talents and the things that he's already displayed when he was with Cincinnati? I just don't understand it. At least they get something for him, because reports were swirling around basically saying that if they hadn't pulled a deal on before the trade deadline, then he was just going to get released. And so I would rather you cut bait with a player, get rid of his contract, not be on the hook for that money, and pick up something, as opposed to just releasing him, still be on the hook for that money, and then possibly seeing him go to another team that he wants to go to and seeing him ball out. That would just crush your heart, and you would just feel like you really took a double L. So they would just take the L in the fact that they signed him, had him on the roster for this long, and his production was just very subpar to none. And then the Pittsburgh Steelers, I mean, you get a guy who possibly might show up. He possibly might be an upgrade to what you all have, and you hope so, because the show that they displayed, or the shit show, I should say, that they displayed with the Eagles was just crazy. Letting A.J. Brown just basically have his way with your entire defense, point at you, mock you, and all of that. Yeah, you need some help. Hell, you could pick up somebody from the local grocery store to cover better than they did. So William Jackson III, I guess he might be what they need, and this might resurrect his career. I don't think so. Then let's talk about the Jonathan Hankins trade, who was traded from the Las Vegas Raiders. Still weird to say that, but the Las Vegas Raiders to the Dallas Cowboys. And the Dallas Cowboys got him along with the 2024 7th round pick. And the Raiders ended up getting a 6th round pick for next year's draft. And both of this, I mean, Jonathan Hankins, to be honest with you, I just think that he's a player that you plug in for depth and you plug in in case you don't have a better option. Nothing more, nothing less. Not to say he's a bad player, but there's nothing really special about him. I don't really hear his name making headlines or him making waves. He's just one of those guys who's just there. He serves his role, his purpose, and that's pretty much it. And then as far as the Raiders concerned, I mean, the compensation that they got for him, a 6th round pick, unless you are, you know, drafting Tom Brady's out here or Antonio Browns and London Fletchers, and who I think was undrafted. So unless you're, you know, you got a real good scout team and general manager who can just really find gems later in the draft, I mean, what are you really expecting from a 6th round pick? Hell, they might get drafted and might not even be there after the cuts. So this trade here was kind of like whatever. It really shouldn't even have had to make news, but it did occur during the trade deadline and all that good stuff. So hey, you gotta report it. And then let's talk about the Jacob Martin trade. Defensive end Jacob Martin, who comes over from the New York Jets. He's a solid young player. That's what I do like about him. 26 years old, definitely has some good pass rushing skills, and I know that they just traded Bradley Chubb to the Dolphins, so you don't want to just trade away a guy and then not have someone to plug in his role. So I guess this is what their play was. You know, you get rid of a guy like Bradley Chubb, you have somebody like Jacob Martin, a much younger option, fill in that role. If he's good, hey, now you've just secured a younger player who can give you just as much production as Bradley Chubb, or possibly better if he fits your system. So I definitely like that. They also got a 5th round pick out of the deal in 2024. I mean, you can't go wrong. Those are hit or miss, and you never know. You know, sometimes they can be real big hits for you, especially in today's NFL. The New York Jets, I really don't like what they did with that. I really don't understand their moves right now. They seem like another team that, you know, in the right situation, they could possibly fight to make it to the playoffs. But with Zach Wilson at the quarterback, I doubt it. I highly doubt it. I don't even know why I even talked about the playoffs. Playoffs? You kidding? You think you're going to make it the playoffs with this guy? I don't think so. So they're sitting at 5-3. I doubt that they'll be above 500 when we get to like week 13, 14, 15. I doubt it. So maybe they're just stacking up draft picks as well. But let's see. Jets fan, don't get mad at me. I'm just speaking what's real. And if you're trying to say that Zach Wilson is not as bad as I'm making him out to be, shame on you. We also got like a couple of other guys. We got Rashad Fenton. That's not really anybody to really talk about. All right, so yeah, the Buffalo Bills secured Dean Marlowe, who was on their team before with the old staff. And they ended up sending a 7th round pick for a guy who's sort of familiar with their system. He's familiar with the franchise. He can also get plugged in immediately, especially for a team whose secondary depth is in question, because not only did they lose Micah Hyde for the season, but now Jordan Poyer is looking like he's dealing with injury issues. So you don't want to go into the later half of the season when it starts getting cold and the games start getting real physical and your safety position is just dwindling by a thread. You don't want that. This team is primed for a Super Bowl run, so you just want to make sure that you got all your depth and all your positions kind of solidified. So securing a guy like Dean Marlowe is just smart for them to do. And, you know, they basically prime themselves to make this push, make this run, continue to be healthy. And yeah, I like it. I will say the winners of this trade deadline would have to be the Buffalo Bills and the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, let's be honest. Getting a guy like Christian McCaffrey, I mean, what's the question? The guy has already shown his value there. It's only going to get even more dangerous for opposing teams once Deebo Samuel comes back and Jukic, or whatever his name is, the fullback, George Kittle, is just only going to continue getting better and better the more reps he continues getting. This team is looking very dangerous, y'all. And remember, I said this. San Francisco 49ers will pose a threat to anybody in the NFC. And yes, I'm even saying that against the pump behind Eagles. And I'm going to say pump behind Eagles because obviously I'm a Commander fan. So yeah, they're in the division. I hate seeing them being undefeated, but I respect it though. Keep that in mind. Now, who lost this trade deadline? Because it seems like there were so many options. But when I look back at it, I would have to say the Bears, the Giants, or the Cardinals. Now, the Bears are kind of like on the fence because they did get some good compensation back. They got a lot of good draft picks, so they're stacked on that end. You lose a guy in Roquan Smith. I mean, obviously, we heard the reports even coming into this season that he wanted to get traded, so you do get rid of a player that didn't want to be in your locker room anyway. But you pick up wide receivers like Chase Claypool, who I don't really see being a good option for you. I definitely don't see him staying with you all long term. And he might be just as bad as the receivers that you all have. And he might not even mesh with Justin Fields. So he could possibly be out of the door or out of the building very sooner than you think. And then you get a guy, you get a trade or a 4th round pick for Robert Quinn. I guess that's serviceable for a guy who's 32 and on the later half of his career. So that's why I put them on the fence. They really didn't do anything good. They got a lot of draft picks. They got rid of players who didn't want to be with them anyway. And so they're just basically shaping up for their younger generation of their squad. Now, the ones who absolutely lost, I would have to say, New York Giants. You really didn't get much for Kadarius Toney, somebody who is a playmaker, who can definitely be a playmaker in the right system. And I feel like they made the wrong trade. I mean, now granted, I don't understand how they would have made the trade, but if they could, if I were them, I would have tried to get rid of Galladay, who has done absolutely nothing. He does not fit their system. He does not even look like he wants to play in New York. And he's just a guy who, why would you even want somebody like that sticking around? He seems like he could be a cancer to your locker room and just somebody who just is a negative Nancy. He's not making any plays. He's not even catching the ball. He hasn't scored a touchdown since he's been there, and he's just taking up a roster spot. So he should have been the guy that they should have tried to get rid of, but I digress. And then with the Arizona Cardinals, well, they really didn't lose anything, but they picked up a guy who is pretty much, he's just as worthless as Kenny Galladay, in my opinion. Had all the tools, all the tangibles, all the things that you want a starting NFL receiver to possess, but he just doesn't put it together. And so they really didn't gain anything in trading for him. They just pretty much helped the Panthers get a headache out of their locker room. And I don't really see him helping them long term. I don't see him being the reason why this offense continues to make advances in the later part of this season. And you possibly just got a guy in the locker room who could possibly start fighting with the head coach there. So who knows? Who cares? But yes, those are my trade deadline winners and losers. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Thank you all for watching to the very end. And if you did enjoy this video, man, then don't hesitate to hit that like button for your mans. And also, if you haven't already, why don't you consider subscribing so that you never miss any Madden content or NFL content that the networks aren't covering. Also, on a side note, y'all let me know some teams that y'all want to see me play with, man, in Madden, because I'm going to put together a series of me playing with every single team in the NFL, going up against competition online and seeing how I stack up with all the different teams, no matter how good or sorry they are. So y'all let me know some teams that y'all would love to see me play and upload up here. And yeah, we'll keep it smooth and funky like that. But yeah, deep in the field, man, keeping it real. I'll catch y'all soon. Peace.